Your Creative Push, episode 159.
Well, this doesn't always have to be casual. How can I explore possibilities within this passion to make a living at it too?
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Jordan Matter. Jordan is a portrait photographer, specializing in actors, models, and dancers. He's a photographer behind the New York Times bestseller, Dancers Among Us, and in October 2016, he is releasing his new book, Dancers After Dark. And Jordan, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I was wondering if you could start out by telling us a little bit about how you got into photography, because I think it's a really interesting story.
Sure. It sounds a little bit like a cliche, but it actually happened. So I'll tell you the story.
Cool.
I was taking a bike up Cadillac Mountain, and that's in Acadia National Park in Maine. And, they make bumper stickers about driving to the top of Cadillac Mountain. So it's an achievement to bike up there. And naturally, when you get up there, you want to take a picture to remind yourself forever what you did. And this was in the days of film. So I took out my Instamatic camera and I set it up and got ready to take a photo. I realized I had no idea how to take that shot. So on the way down the mountain, you have a lot of time on the bike, and I thought, it would be cool to take a photography course so I could learn how to take that landscape photo better. And that was the first germ of the idea. And the thing that's kind of cool about it is there's been any number of ideas that I've had over my lifetime of things I didn't follow through on. Who knows where any of those may have taken me, but luckily for me, I followed through on that idea. And I took a black and white printing course at School of Visual Arts in New York City. And when I saw my first print come up in the developer, it was like a hallelujah moment. I just suddenly realized this is what I wanted to do.
The hallelujah moment. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment where you just know. And I think a lot of people that are listening have that experience with whatever it is that they do. And like you said, sometimes there's been other things that you haven't followed through with. What do you think it is that made you follow through with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, where I was at in my life probably had something to do with it, and that I was dissatisfied with what I was doing and willing to take a risk on something new. And also that I didn't really immediately think about all the potential. It was more like, let me learn how to do this skill. Rather than let me learn how to become a professional photographer. Now, the trick with this was, and I've never really talked much about this, but the trick with it was, and this happens a lot with stuff, I got hooked immediately. I saw the print come up. I said, this is what I need to do. I took a couple of cool shots that I really liked. I was very, very enthusiastic about it. And then I walked around with my camera taking pictures, and I realized, to my frustration, how much I had to learn. It didn't come easy. It wasn't automatic. It wasn't just like the print came up, I'm going to be a photographer, now I'm a photographer. There was a struggle of years of carrying my camera around and not knowing exactly how to do what I wanted to do, or even knowing what I wanted to do. And it was in that period of time that I'm so fortunate that I kept doing it. And there was one moment in my life that was really life-changing. I was living with my fiance, who's now my wife, and she was accepted to vet school, and we were living together in New York City. And I had put down my camera at this point. I had thought, well, I don't see how I'm going to make a living. I'm done with just taking street photos. I don't know what I want to do next. And I hadn't picked it up in 6 months. And she got accepted to vet school, and she left and moved to Canada to go to vet school, and she was going to be gone for 4 years. And at the time, I was an actor, which meant that I was a waiter. So I was waiting tables, and she was becoming a doctor. And I just thought, man, if she comes back in 4 years and I'm still a waiter, I just won't be able to live with myself. I need to find something that I can move on professionally, I can really focus on, like she focuses on her veterinary studies. And so I picked up the camera again, but this time I went at it with renewed gusto.
Do you find that it was more of like a passion with the photography as opposed to the acting? Like, did you ever have that same kind of joy that you find from photography?
Oh, I've never felt anything like I feel for photography and anything else. My first passion was baseball, and I played baseball through college, and I was on scholarship, and I did really well. And there were moments of passion, high drama. You hit a game-winning home run, you're jogging the bases. There's really nothing that matches that, but that was every once in a while. And then acting, I think I enjoyed the attention of it, and I did pretty well at it. But it wasn't a passion. It wasn't something I thought about when I woke up and thought about again when I went to sleep. And once I started doing photography, I really obsessed over it, and I thought about it all the time. The only thing I want to just make sure is clear. I don't want to oversimplify this. It wasn't that. It really was that secondary time, the second tier of where I really, really focused. The first time was carrying around a camera. Oh, this is kind of cool. And then getting discouraged because it didn't come easily. And then when I had a motivating force of, it's not just art, but also it can be a professional career that I could succeed at. And once I allowed myself to imagine that possibility, that's when I got really motivated. And so I don't know that I'm really meant for, a casual passion for me, because I tried it with photography and it didn't last. And then I put the camera down. But then once I decided, no, this isn't going to be casual. This is going to be my everything. I allowed myself to get fully 100% invested in it. And also the good fortune in a way of not having my wife here at the time meant that I had all the time in the world to do nothing but obsess.
Right. You can kind of sink your teeth into that kind of obsession or addiction almost, and let it become your entire existence.
It is. And I think the thing that's frustrating, and maybe probably for a lot of your listeners, I've been there, I know the feeling, is to have something that you're passionate about and then to have something that you do for work. And that those things are not the same thing at all. Maybe for you, you're at work and you just want to get back to your podcast. You want to do your interview, or you want to edit, you want to find your next guest, and that's where your mind is. But your body is at work. And balancing those two things can be really challenging sometimes. I definitely think that having the passion outside of work is much healthier than not having it. But I also think that always keeping one eye on, well, this doesn't always have to be casual. How can I explore possibilities within this passion to make a living at it too? How could your podcast become something that, is a financially beneficial situation for you so that you can just do that full time? Or maybe you take the skills you learn from editing all this and then you become an audio editor and still do your podcast, but at least that way you're always in the same world. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody that's listening probably has something they love and maybe they do it on the side, but there's always the chance that you could actually do it all the time, because I'm speaking from my own personal experience that there is no more incredible feeling outside of parenting, I think, than going to work and loving it. And that's how I feel every day.
Yeah, and you absolutely read my mind. That is absolutely what I'm thinking about. My body's at work, but my brain is thinking about the podcast and thinking about, exactly like you were saying. And I think you really did nail it, talking about how for a lot of people, you find this passion and then you hit that wall, you hit that gap where you realize that you aren't that great at it yet and that there's so much to learn. I think for a lot of people, like it kind of did for you, it stops you in your tracks and it makes you not want to do it. How do you then push through that? Does it take a driving force like realizing that you don't want to be in that same place in 4 years and that you just have to like really push through? Or is there something else that people can do to help them to kind of find that path?
Yeah, I guess it's different for everybody. I mean, I guess it's the old, there's no atheists in the trenches, right? I mean, like when I wasn't happy with my life, or when I feared looking my wife in the eye 4 years later and having not moved forward one step, or maybe I had done a couple of Law and Orders and that was it. In that 4 years, I had nothing to show for it. That was a significant motivating force for me. But the bigger thing for me was that I was allowing myself to fantasize about what it could become, whereas before I had seen why it wouldn't become that. I think that was the biggest difference. The first part of my photography, those first couple of years when I carried my camera around the street, I went to an exhibition. So I did this for like 3 months, right? And I just took this class and my shots were really cool, especially given, like I had never done it before. The teacher was enthusiastic and I thought I was not so bad at this. I thought I had a definite career as a street photographer. And then I went to an exhibition by Henri Cartier-Bresson, a French street photographer. And it was just suddenly the realization, oh, I suck. Like I'm trying to do what he did 50 years ago and I can't do it 1% as well as he did it. And I realized, this isn't my calling, street photography, but I don't know what is, but this isn't. And so screw it. I'm not going to do it. It was just immediately demoralizing because I compared myself to him and I realized I wasn't as good. I didn't know how I would get there. And I figured, well, I'll just stick with what I'm already doing or find something new because this obviously isn't going to work out. It was kind of like a defeatist attitude. When my wife left and I thought about it again, I thought, well, what if I did succeed? How would that feel? How exciting would that be to be able to do this every day and this would be my career? And I also chose a path that was much better for who I am and much easier to attain because I was an actor and I was a waiter. So those two things opened me up to a lot of actors. I was exposed to actors all the time. So I started doing acting headshots. And that taught me portraiture and it taught me to have a style of specific to me. And it also started bringing money in. And once I started bringing money in, I started feeling successful and confident. And you get positive reinforcement because everyone's saying how much they love your photos. And it's just like a daily reinforcement. And that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, and it perfectly coincides with what you were talking about before about getting into that passion, but then finding the kind of niche or the specific path that's specific to you, like you said with the headshots. It had to have been like a eureka moment or another hallelujah hallelujah moment.
I exactly have that moment with the first headshots I took. It was the same moment. I had the moment with the dark room and then the moment with the headshots. And I had been an actor and I had seen headshots and I knew that these were good. They were different. I could tell. And that was very exciting. But I think the mistake I made, which maybe a lot of your listeners may make, I don't know, is that I considered photography to be one thing rather than under a large umbrella with lots of different things under it. So, I'm not good at photography because I'm not good at street photography. I'm not patient enough to wait for the shot. Same reason I can't do landscape photography. So I just said I wasn't good at photography, but I found my niche within photography. And I think that's the answer. The answer is to, if you know you love things in the general sense, a certain subject matter, keep working until you find specifically where you fit into that.
Exactly. And then when you find, like you were saying, like those 3 months where you're just walking around and, you're kind of digging what you're doing. And you're having fun with it. It's like the honeymoon phase.
Right, exactly.
It's like trying to always find that honeymoon phase. And then when you do hit that wall, whether it's, you just see how much work that you have to do and you know that you don't want to do it because, like you said, you don't have that, not necessarily skill set, but it just wouldn't be enjoyable for you to have that kind of patience. Instead of stopping, when you hit that wall, it's about pivoting and continue to try to maintain that honeymoon phase, but find that exact path where, you're going to work every day happy.
Yeah. But what's the key into it, as you asked, because I think it's just human nature to give up. That's the thing. I mean, I think we're survivalists, which in a way means we look for the easiest path. Like I watch my son, he's 10, he has had in the past year probably interest in every sport. But as soon as there's a little challenge to the sport, I think he may get discouraged and look for a different sport. It's just human nature. And the idea of realizing your fallibility and working through it anyway is, I think, what makes people great, right? I mean, how long did Harry Potter take to write? How many times could she have given up on that book? She was a single mom writing when her kid was asleep. She wrote Harry Potter, but it couldn't have been easy. I think the Humans of New York, he was doing that for a year before anybody noticed on Facebook. So imagine that. You're going out every single day for a year, taking pictures, interviewing people, posting it up, no likes, 1 like, 5 likes.
Right.
And you're still doing it. And now it's Humans of New York.
And that's where the honeymoon type feeling has to be there. It has to be enjoyable because if you do find that you have no audience or it takes you, 10 years to find an audience, as long as you're enjoying it throughout that entire process, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's why the big cliche of you do it for yourself, not for your audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, kind of going along with we were talking about finding your niche with the headshot photography, because I want to get into your new book, Dancers After Dark, but yeah. I guess maybe the best place to start would be your previous book, Dancers Among Us. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that started?
Sure. Well, it actually started with a book prior to that called Uncovered. And I think I started to build this style for myself with that book. Uncovered is a book of topless women, everyday women of all shapes, sizes, and ages, in the streets of New York doing everyday things like, shopping or whatever, eating an ice cream cone, something like that. And then they're interviewed about their body image issues. And this came about because I was photographing all these actresses and models who would tell me not to photograph their arms or their legs because they were fat. And I realized their body image was terrible, even though they looked great. And so I started, having them, women over 60 take off their shirts and show us what they really look like, unguarded and uncovered, and then talk about how they felt about their bodies. But the style of photography was very much like the make the ordinary extraordinary. And then I self-published that book, and it did well for a self-published book. And then years later, I came up with the idea for Dancers Among Us by seeing my son play with his toy bus. And he was 3 at the time, and he had this level of enthusiasm for his fantasy life that made me realize that as we get older, we lose the joy of the everyday. I suddenly thought, even though I had never photographed dancers before, that I could get dancers to create a world as if seen through the eyes of a child, where the small everyday moments of life are magical and exciting. And I reached out to a dancer I knew and asked him if he could get me some dancers from his dance company. It just happened to be Paul Taylor Dance Company, which is one of the best dance companies in the world. And they said yes. And so I created that body of work based on this idea of celebrating the everyday.
I love that.
So it was the same kind of thing as Uncovered. It was basically taking the ordinary everyday life and turning it on its head and making it extraordinary in some way.
And did you find you talked a little bit about magic. Magic is one of my favorite things to talk about because I think if you're really honest with yourself and with your art and you put yourself out there, magic kind of happens. Mm-hmm. Did you experience any types of little magical events, like serendipitous things that happened?
Oh, God. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, all over the place. I mean, my whole approach to my work and life, but mainly my work, is serendipity. The process of creating every image is serendipitous. Mm. I never have a plan for anything. I'll tell a dancer or many dancers to meet me on a corner in a Starbucks somewhere, and I walk around looking for shots, and then we create it together. So everything you see is out of the moment. And then the whole process of getting the book made was also serendipity. And I can tell you that story if you want to hear it, and then if you decide to cut it because the interview's too long, you can, but it's a pretty cool story.
Please.
So what happened was, the photos, once again, I had that Humans of New York thing where I was posting it for 6 months or whatever. Nobody noticed. And then one of the photos went viral. And all of a sudden I was getting calls, about putting it in newspapers. And I got a literary agent, and the literary agent took me to all these publishers. And all the publishers, this is about 15 or 20 meetings I have with major publishers in New York. They looked at the picture, and every meeting, they would look at the photographs and they would say, these are really gorgeous. We absolutely have to do a book. So it looked like we had a bidding war on our hands here. Mm. But then they all passed the idea on to the sales department, and every publisher's sales department said, nah, it'll never sell. Now, these were all set in New York City at the time, and they were dance photographs in New York City. And the people said, who cares? Dance in New York City? Nobody's going to buy that. So everybody passed, and all of a sudden it was completely dead. It was just, the project was dead. I stopped shooting. It was over.
That's brutal.
Yeah. And then what I came to find out was, soon after that, a junior designer at Workman Publishing had seen one of my pictures online, printed it up, and hung it in her cubicle because it made her feel good. And it was just sitting there. And every time the creative director would walk by, she'd say, we should meet this guy. And they go, dance in New York. Who's going to care? Eventually, she just wore them down to meet me to discuss a calendar only. And when I was talking about a calendar with them in this meeting, I brought up a book. And they said, well, a book of New York City dancers, nobody's going to buy that. And I lied. And I said, well, actually, I'm going to travel around the country this summer to shoot all over the country, which was a complete lie. I just didn't want to hear no again. Mm. And they said, well, that could be interesting. So then I actually had to travel all around the country. And when I finally did start traveling, I sent them the pictures, and they thought, oh, this is pretty good. And they signed up for it. We spent another year or two making it. It turned into, a New York Times bestseller, and spent months on the list. So it was a wonderful cherry on top of this whole long journey that went from just an idea into potential, into completely dead, and then it had life, and then it actually became a big hit.
Like the Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Phoenix. It was
I love
dead
it.
so many different times.
Yeah, and I think that's super inspirational too when you do have this wonderful idea that you believe in to push it, to keep trying to find the way to get it out there.
And you're right, but I just want to be really clear about that because that can be kind of whitewashing it a little bit because the problem that most people run into and that I've run into on many occasions with other things is how easy it is to stop if you're not getting the right reinforcement. I remember I had a young child my son, and then my daughter had just been born while I was working on this. So I had two kids at home that I desperately wanted to see. And I would have to make the decision, do I go into the city and do I spend the day and the night shooting dancers for no reason? Nobody was asking me to do it, just because I loved the project. And then if I would spend that day and I wouldn't get anything good, I would feel like I had wasted a day. I hadn't made any money and I hadn't spent the time with my family. So it was a wasted day. And this conflict was inside of me all the time. It was always extremely difficult to leave my family and to go shoot a passion project that I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. It was much easier to go shoot something where I was making money. But if it was just for my own personal art and my need to express myself, it was hard. And I had to keep forcing myself to do it over and over.
So what's the lesson there? Like, when is it that you draw the line? When is it that you, I guess, realize that if a project is in fact not going to sell or not going to make it, where's the line then? When do you decide to kind of kill your baby and move on to another thing?
I actually don't think that's the struggle for most people. I think the struggle for most people is the struggle that I had, which is, how do I not quit?
Mm-hmm.
I think most people quit way before they go too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the much bigger challenge is, wow, I'm not getting an immediate reaction to this, but I really love it and I believe in it, but nobody likes it and I need to pay the bills, so screw it, I'm going to give up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that happens more often than it should.
Bills suck.
Yeah, bills suck. And you can pay your bills and have your passion project. Those things can coexist. The challenge is to also have a personal life and to sleep. There's
right.
There's these four components to my life. That's all I do. I mean, I don't I have friends, but I rarely see them. I'm either with my family, I'm working on a passion project, I'm making money, or I'm sleeping. That's it.
Right.
We're talking to you.
Exactly. Well, I really appreciate that time.
Sure.
Yeah. On a recent interview, somebody said, when somebody asked them, how do you do it? Like, how do you produce all this work? And he said, no Xbox, no friends. It's so true, though.
That's a good summary of it. And here's my favorite quote. Well, no, I have several. I love quotes, but one of them that boils down specifically to this is, no one looks back on their life and remembers the night they got plenty of sleep. So the thing that I cut out of that equation is sleep. I've just learned to exist with very, very little sleep so that I can do all the other things I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Cutting out like 1 or 2 hours of sleep every single day. It might make you have a little bags under your eyes, but you can also, I think it's important to kind of tally that time where you're putting in a little bit of time every single day towards, a passion project or towards a body of work, and then make sure you look back at what you accomplished and what you are able to get by giving up that sleep or that hour of, that TV show that you watch every week.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
I'll tell you what, if you're watching TV or if you're on your Xbox or if you're on Facebook or reading about politics or any of those things, you have no excuse for not pursuing your passion. None. Because that's the time you could use for it. And what are you getting out of it? What are you gaining from that baseball game?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No, I hear you. And the other thing too is when you sacrifice things like that, it seems painful, because I used to be a Netflix binger. Like, I just would watch TV show after TV show, and it seems like a painful thing to be like, wow, I'm never going to watch this show again, or I'm never going to, catch up with this series, and perhaps I won't be able to, when I go out with friends who are also addicted to TV, I won't be able to join in the conversation. But it's really actually not that hard when you're on the other side of it, when you can get off of that addiction. It's really not that bad, because especially when you can see the body of work that you were able to create.
Yeah, you're filling it with something that's more satisfying to you. Once you have that feeling of joy for what you do, I don't see the attraction to mindless anything.
Absolutely. Now, how did Dancers After Dark come to be? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Dancers After Dark really is about what we're talking about. It's a photographic celebration of passion and one's willingness to pursue it at all costs. So I worked on Dancers Among Us for 6 years. I'm still shooting it. And what I learned from these dancers is, what's a dancer's life? They start from their time they're 5. Their career's over by the time they're 30 or 35. In that time, they've accumulated no savings, even if they have succeeded beyond anybody's wildest imagination. And they have no other skills when they're done. So it's not a career that anybody, encourages their kids to pursue, unless you're a crazy dance mom. But it's something that comes from deep inside of them, a passion that's so powerful that they pursue it against all odds. And the specifics of Dancers After Dark, to explain the project, they're all nudes, they're all at night, and they are all in public, usually in very iconic locations around Europe and North America. And I didn't have any permits to do it. I didn't have any permission. And the reason I did it, and the reason they're naked, is not gratuitous, it's very subtle, is because on their bodies you can see, etched into every muscle, the thousands of hours of work that they put into their passion that you just don't see when they're wearing their clothes. And the fearlessness that is embodied in this entire book by the willingness to be vulnerable and to break the law everywhere represents the vulnerability of pursuing a career in something where most likely you're going to fail, but you pursue it anyway. And the nighttime aspect of it is about dreaming. That's when we dream, and that's what they have. They have big dreams.
I love it. Yeah, the vulnerability and just the kind of like we were talking about, exactly like you said. It's, what every kind of creative person has inside of them that they just need to get out,
Yeah.
And the putting in the hours is, etching those muscles, whatever the muscle it is, whether it's, being a wonderful headshot photographer or being a savvy writer or being a talented musician. It's those hours and hours of practice where you're giving up other things, whether it's money, whether it's sleep, any number of things that you enjoy in your life that you're actually sacrificing for this thing.
Yes, and we can't take a photograph of our passion, right? I can't take a photograph that would properly show how much work you've put in since January in your passion, and you couldn't take a photograph that really showed what I do. But I can photograph their passion in their bodies. And so they're representative of all of us. Anybody that spends 10,000 hours on what they do are going to get as good at what they do as these dancers are at that. I have these dancers, they're at the top of their game. The dancers that volunteered for this blow my mind. The list is in the book, but it's every major dance company in Europe and North America. They all came out, volunteered their time, not unpaid. And the beauty of it was the process was completely spontaneous. I could never tell them what we were going to do, but it always involved nudity. So they would show up understanding they were going to get naked somewhere in public. And they didn't know where or what pose or what was going to happen or if they were going to get arrested or somebody was going to take an iPhone photo and post it online. One of my photos went viral and I didn't take it.
What?
Yeah, I had this one shot. I still haven't released my version of it, of 9 ballerinas all on point in the middle of the meatpacking district in New York City, which was really hard to achieve. And we did it all in one night. And it's raining and the shot's gorgeous. And some guy comes up right next to me as I'm shooting it and takes an iPhone photo and then posts it the next day. And it went completely viral.
What was your emotion about that?
Well, my emotion was like, I mean, motherfucker. Like, you see what I'm doing.
Yeah, right? I set this up, bro.
I only do it because, like, I got at least 20 emails from people or Facebook messages like, is this yours? Because this looks like your project. I said, well, mine is like one step to the right.
Wow, I would have punched him.
Well, I didn't know it had happened. I didn't know.
I got you.
I was too busy shooting. I only knew it the next day. I could see from the proximity of the shot that he was right next to me.
That's also got to be so cool to see that, though. To see that show up where you're like, okay, this went viral and I didn't even fucking do it.
And I didn't even do it, yeah. And the funny thing is, like, it's interesting about viral stuff, just as a side note, because a lot of times it's the unexpected thing that goes viral. So if you post a lot of pictures about, your kids and your dog, and all of a sudden you post 9 naked dancers, that could be completely shocking.
Right.
And everybody wants to share it. Whereas if I'm posting pictures of naked people every day and I post that, people are like, oh, that's cool for that project, but I know what this is. Like, I understand the context.
Oh, man. So did you get any other kind of trouble, like any legal trouble, or not yet?
The tagline for the book is 300 dancers, 400 locations, no clothes, no arrests, no regrets.
Nice.
Yeah. So that the short answer is no, I never got arrested, but we got interrupted by police over 40 times. And the process was, because it really wasn't gratuitous. It wasn't about the nudity so much as it was about the celebration of their bodies, but they had to be naked to do it. Now, of course, that adds a little thrill to the process and also thrill to the photos, which I like. But I wasn't out there like saying, hey, I'm going to break the law. It just so happened that I was breaking the law. The process was that we would rehearse the shoot a lot with them in like sports bras and shorts. And then when it came time to shoot it, they would strip down. I'd try and shoot it in under 30 seconds. But invariably, especially with the larger group shots, it would take many tries before we got the final shot. So they would have to do it many, many times. And a lot of times it was in very busy areas, like in the middle of 6th Avenue, for example. I had 5 dancers piled on top of each other in the middle of 6th Avenue, but they were all covering stuff, so if we would shoot it and it was like, that looked great. Oh, wait, I can see your nipple. We have to do it again.
Right. Do you have any tips for people who might struggle with spontaneity? Because when I first started the podcast, I would always be like, okay, here are the questions that I'm going to ask you. Boom, boom, boom. And then I found that being a little bit more open to letting things go wherever they're going to naturally go kind of allows for a much better conversation, a much better process. But I think it's a tough thing to do. It's a scary thing to do, to not know, exactly what's going to happen. And especially when you're working with other people who also don't know what's going to happen and you're in charge. Is that ever scary for you? And what kind of advice would you give to people that kind of struggle with that in their art?
I find it exhausting. Because even though it's the only way I can work, imagine you have people who have gotten on a plane and flown to meet you, or driven 6 or 8 hours. This happens regularly, and they want to do a shoot, and they show up and you have no idea what you're going to do. I used to, when I was starting this process, I would feel anxious about that. I would feel like they have expectations, and the longer I'm trying to figure it out, the more uncertain and frustrated they're going to become. And I would start allowing that into my head, and then it would spiral. But I would always reassure them, the shot's just around the corner. We just have to find it. But I always felt a little awkward about that. But I don't, the other way just doesn't work for me, because once you cut out spontaneity, once you cut out the fresh moment, then all you're looking for is the thing you've already planned to do. So you might have a question that you've planned to ask me right now. And if you're going to stick rigidly to that plan, and then I start saying something, you're not going to go off on that tangent that could lead us to somewhere really cool, because you know your next question already.
Right.
Right. So I would suggest to everybody, a great exercise is just to do it. Just put your notes away. Like whatever it is that you need to do, whatever your passion is, believe me, planning it is just going to get in the way of it. It's not going to help it.
Yeah, it's like you're setting yourself up, not for failure necessarily, but you already have the thing done in your mind, and it's you don't allow to pivot to go down an interesting path.
Right, and it's not going to be how you had imagined it anyway. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. There's a photographer named Gregory Crewdson.
Love him.
Yeah. Now, there's nothing spontaneous about that except for the original idea.
Right.
Right? I mean, but that is, movies, you can't just say, well, hey, we'll just get a crew and we'll wing it. I mean, I understand that sometimes things have to be planned out. But I have to imagine, even within that, and I actually know this because I've photographed several of Gregory's subjects. I've asked them about the process. And on movie sets, I've been on lots of movie sets. The great ones, they allow for spontaneity within that too. So they might have an idea of how they're going to do it a certain way. And then they'll do it another way anyway. So another way to look at it for your listeners would be, if you really need to control the situation and you're just most comfortable doing that, then go ahead and do it. like do it exactly how you planned it out meticulously and write down notes and do it. And then leave some time for spontaneity afterwards. So then that way you'll feel comfortable and reassured that you've gotten it. So you haven't wasted anyone's time. But then you also allow it to go a different direction and see what you like better. So the great example for you would be do the whole interview exactly how you wanted to do it, and then start asking some questions and freeballing and see what happens. And I think that people will start discovering that the free-form, spontaneous approach is really very creative, but maybe they need to ease into it.
Makes a lot of sense, man. Yeah. And it's like adding bonus material almost. So, the pressure's off, and then you can maybe start to incorporate that, like, that extra time, that bonus time, into the actual process later. Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake people make is they plan something out and then they do it as planned and then they stop. And they think, well, I got it. I got what I expected. But you want to surprise yourself. You don't want to just get what you expect.
Yeah, super boring. And then you're going to lose your passion for it too during the actual process of it if you've planned it all out.
Probably. I mean, I think I'm of the extreme in this working method. There was one time where I was brought out to Korea to do a fashion spread for this big Korean Vanity Fair magazine. So they had, a whole crew. They had a whole day set up. There was like 3 models and there were 3 big, huge trailers, one for makeup and hair, one for costumes and wardrobe, and one for me and the dancers. So they said, okay, well, the shoot's on Friday. So Wednesday and Thursday we will scout, and then on Friday we'll shoot. And then I said, well, actually, I don't scout. I just shoot. And they said, well, how will you know where to shoot? I said, well, we'll find it that day. Because if we go to a spot on Wednesday, it's not going to look the same on Friday anyway. So let's just wing it. So we had like 3 huge trailers driving through like congested traffic downtown Seoul, and I would see something, I go, oh, go right, and then they'd all have to like pull over
Caravan.
and go right. And there was the craziest thing, and even I was thinking, this is so ridiculous. Why didn't I just scout? And so many times I always felt I should have just scouted this, but I never did, and I was usually happy with the results.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Well, the one thing that I can't improvise is the way that I end every interview, and that's with what I call the final push.
Okay.
And that's where I ask you to kind of reach through the microphone and just grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best words of advice and really just push them to pursue their creative passions.
Well, I think that the words that will best summarize this conversation and succinctly boil it all down to one sentence is leap and the net will appear.
Yeah, there's nothing better. I mean, just go for it, and then, like we were saying before, just then find the way that it's going to work specifically for you, but just go for it. If
you want something badly enough, the universe will conspire to give it to you.
I agree.
It's just the way things work. And that's what I love about that quote. Leap first and then look for the net. Don't look for the net before you leap, because you won't see it.
Or you'll just be too scared.
But it's there. It will grab you.
Oh, man. Jordan, thank you so much, dude, for coming on the show today and for giving us that push, man.
No problem.
And you can find Jordan on dancersafterdark.com to pick up his book. We'll have all the links we mentioned today at yourcreativepush.com/Jordan Matter, Matter. And when can people pick up the book, the new book?
They can pick it up right now. It's on pre-order. There's 2 versions. There's a soft cover and hardcover. The hardcover is almost sold out, but it is just gorgeous. It comes with an art print and a signed book, and it's in a slipcase. And then the paperback is the same exact book, same paper, really beautiful too. And both are available everywhere on Amazon and BarnesNoble.com. And on October 18th, they will be in bookstores.
Very cool, man. Jordan, thanks again, brother.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
My thanks to Jordan for coming on the show. So much good stuff here. And one of the really important lessons here was and kind of unique things about Jordan was the 2 ways that he approached his photography. The first, coming at something as a hobby, the honeymoon phase, as I kept referring to it. And this is totally fun, totally joyful experience because you're able to really enjoy your creative passion without the big, grand plans of what's next. Where is this taking me? Is it worth spending all this time doing it? It's just enjoying your passion. And then opposite of that, which Jordan also went through, was making the decision to make this everything more than just a passion. And I think when you make that big decision and just convince yourself that you are going to make it, you are going to find a way to make it your entire life, I think that's when the universe really starts to conspire to help you. And it comes down to his quote about keeping one eye on the fact that this doesn't always have to be casual. How can I explore possibilities within this passion to make a living at it too? And I think it's really important to, as you're enjoying it, as you're going through that honeymoon phase, that's the key, the way to walk that kind of balance in between the two journeys that he took. It's keeping an open mind to potential avenues that you never would have discovered had you not leapt first and found the net later, as he said. Or even better, the net finding you once you put yourself out there. And I love pushing the idea of just starting, just beginning your creative journey and then figuring out all those other details later. I think it's so important and really so inspiring. So again, thank you to Jordan. If you want to check out his book, I highly recommend you do. Head to dancersafterdark.com, or if you're listening to this before October 18th, Jordan has invited you to his opening party, the launch party for Dancers After Dark. It's 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Rizzoli Bookstore in New York City. We'll have a link in the show notes page. Again, yourcreativepush.com/JordanMatter or yourcreativepush.com/159 if you want to attend. There's going to be cocktails there. I highly recommend you do. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're inspired to go and get your work done. So please go and get it done. And we will see you on Wednesday if you need the push again. I love you all, and we will see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.